Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. And welcome to our presentation, which is entitled A Guide to Data Loss Prevention with Guardian for Content Suite and Extended ECM, as well as for eDOCS. My name is Joshua Wertheim. I am president of Wertheim Global Solutions, and today I am joined by Brent Reed, who is our Director of Development and Support. This is the first of a series of presentations which will be given during our first ever OpenText SolEx Expo. You're going to hear from 9 different OpenText partners who are the best OT partners in the world and their subject area expertise. And I thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a very productive day and that you enjoy our webinar. So, where does Guardian fit in the realm of security and compliance and DLP? Most, if not all, organizations do a good job of focusing on threats from outside the organization. So most organizations have applications or hardware that deal with hacking, ransomware, viruses, and such. That includes the implementation of a firewall that can protect you from external threats as they may try to worm their way into your environment. But what we have found is that not a lot of organizations give adequate consideration to threats from within their organization. These threats could come from disgruntled employees or people that want to go public with confidential information, or just outright theft of the information to use for whatever purposes they feel the need or the desire to use them for. That also includes attacks from within by people who may phish the credentials of a valid user in your organization, and then using those valid credentials, worm their way into the system in order to be able to steal documents or publish documents that are confidential, etc. So these two areas, real individuals who have access to your system from within, as well as people who phish the credentials of people who are valid users, are serious threats to an organization that need to be addressed. And that's where Guardian comes in, because Guardian protects the information in your environment from these sorts of attacks. An example that just recently was made it into the newspaper was a situation where the company Netflix fired an employee who had leaked info about what one of their entertainers was paid for a special that was on Netflix that turned out to be pretty confidential. And the interesting part of this and why this is here is because of what Netflix announced along with the information about the leaking of the material. They admitted that the user had downloaded and shared sensitive information, but they didn't find out about it until after the information was leaked, and they had done a review of their internal security logs or their activity logs to determine who was the source of that leak. Well, that's not good. What you want to do is to be able to identify people who are trying to steal the information before it gets out into the public domain. Another example that I'm pretty sure most of us, if not all of us, are familiar with is the Facebook whistleblower. What the Facebook whistleblower admitted during her Senate testimony was that while she was browsing all the sensitive documents and apparently downloading them so she could release them to the public through the Wall Street Journal and then release them to the Senate, was that nobody was paying attention to what she was doing. Obviously, nobody was standing over her shoulder, which would have been one way for people to notice what she was doing. But there were no internal systems in place that would have identified that she was taking those documents or even browsing those documents, let alone what she was going to be doing with them. Another example, which didn't make the paper but ended up being a criminal case, is the situation where the IT director of a company called Palo Alto Networks was stealing information out of their repository in order to make trades on stock information on stocks based upon the information in the documents they were stealing. Again, nobody was watching. And the user, the IT director, ended up being able to take many documents over a long period of time and use them for his own financial benefit against the law. So, what do all those people, as well as a lot of other folks that have done similar things, have in common? And we include Edward Snowden in this category because Edward Snowden downloaded millions of documents right from the system of the NSA without anybody watching. And in the case of Edward Snowden, nobody knew he had taken the documents until he had fled the country, gone to Hong Kong, met with the newspaper publisher or the newspaper reporter from the Guardian, released those documents to the fellow at the Guardian, and the documents ended up in the press. That's when NSA learned of the theft. Similarly, Bradley Manning of the United States Army did something very similar. We also include here the Panama Papers. We include the Pandora Papers. Again, situations where users with credentials that allowed them to have access to documents, in many cases very sensitive or confidential materials, were taken under the nose of the organization that they worked for and were able to then release that information to the press. We also include in here the hacker that phished John Podesta's email account at the Democratic National Committee. That hacker phished the credentials of John Podesta, then used those stolen credentials in order to get into the email system of the DNC and download and then release documents and emails that were in the email system of the DNC. Well, what they had in common, they were not being monitored. Nobody was watching what they were doing. They had the authority to access confidential information. They stole that information, they made it public, and they embarrassed their employer without their knowledge until it was too late. This is the purpose, the sole function of Guardian, to protect an organization from having this happen to you. So these are the questions we would like you to ask yourself. First, has anyone ever taken information out of your ECM repository without permission? Has anybody stolen that information and you didn't know about it until it was too late? Do you have a concern that somebody might do that right now or might do that in the future? And we're not talking necessarily about situations where somebody goes to the press. We're also talking about situations where somebody might take documents and use them for their own nefarious purposes, like with Palo Alto Networks. Are you concerned that your users might be susceptible to phishing attacks? Practically everyone in the world could be susceptible to a phishing attack. The question is, if somebody's credentials get phished, what will the phisher do with that information? Will they end up trying to steal documents out of your system? Do you have a way? Key question. Do you have a way to stop the person while it is occurring instead of learning about it when it's too late? And what would happen if somebody stole information and then leaked it or used it against you or perhaps your customers or clients? So how does Guardian protect you? Well, what Guardian does is it monitors the activities of users in real time and acts upon those activities while they are occurring. And if somebody exceeds a threshold for what is allowable to the user to do for any specific activity, an alert can be sent to the person's employer, the security officer, whoever you deem necessary to receive the alerts. And key to Guardian is the fact that if a user continues to breach their duties in terms of taking the information or accessing information, their account can be disabled pending a review by the appropriate authorities within the organization to determine whether the person is doing something they should be doing or something they should not be doing. And of course, if they're allowed to do that, then the account can be re-enabled. And if they're not supposed to be doing what they're doing, then appropriate action can be taken to stop them immediately. So Guardian is a solution for what I've been describing to you for both content server, extended ECM, and eDOCS. It helps you to minimize the internal risks to your organization by detecting, investigating, and acting upon the activities. It allows you to set what types of activities are risky to you and to determine who should be monitored and what should be done if the the threshold is exceeded for what is risky. And then you can do what is necessary to protect yourself from any further actions by that user and also protect yourself from the damages that could be done if the user were to continue with unabated with that activity. So what is key to Guardian is that it is a proactive instead of a reactive approach to handling the activities of end users. So it allows you to identify and to report on suspicious or criminal activity while it is happening. You don't have to wait until the documents are gone before you act. It can monitor individuals, it can monitor groups, or it can monitor all users in a library. It can disable a user when the thresholds are met or exceeded. It does allow for exceptions. So for instance, if a user is going to be doing some e-discovery in which they are going to be downloading or viewing thousands of documents, which would normally trigger an event in Guardian, you can set an exception that says this person is doing e-discovery at such and such a date for such a length of time. And so that activity should not be monitored during that time. It does work with all the latest versions of Content Suite and with eDOCS. Here are an example of a couple of different screens. We're going to do the full demo in a minute, but I wanted to show you what Guardian can do. So the creation of the rules is very simple. It's done by an administrator, obviously somebody with authority to do these things, but it allows you to set a name for the rule, a period, and what type of rule it is. Brent will get into that in detail in a moment. And you can apply it to a specific user or a group of users or a library, as I indicated earlier. Adding activities and thresholds to the rules is the other part of setting a rule. All the content server rules are available to you if you're using content server, and all the eDOCS activities are available to you if you're using eDOCS. And that would include the ability to add your own activity types, which is possible with Guardian, which is possible for content server, not so typically with eDOCS. So if you have a new activity type that you want to monitor, that's part of a custom application that you have running in your system, you simply add that activity into the Guardian tables, and then you can monitor that activity as well. So it allows you to set the thresholds. You can have an unlimited number of thresholds. Brent will describe that in more detail as well. And then who should get notified when an event is triggered within Guardian. So at this point, Brent is going to switch to his machine so he can perform the demo.
Yeah, hello everyone. Hello everyone. Appreciate you joining us. As you can see here, we have the screen that shows where you create the rules in Guardian. The first part, of course, is you give the rule a name, and it should be descriptive. And of course, this one's for a demo. You can set a start date for your rule, and that way you can set up the rules and know that you're going to launch the program sometime in the future. And if you need, you can put an end date in if you want to temporarily monitor a person or a group. And then you decide whether it's a library-wide rule. Does it allow the rule to disable users and enable them? And you can turn off the rule if you need to. Now, here's the important part of the rule. How do you base the rule? Our predictive analysis is what really sets us apart from anybody that comes close to offering the same functionality, because what this does is analyzes a user's behavior and it compares that behavior to that user's behavior in the past. So it uses their past activities to say what is normal for that user. You don't have to come up with arbitrary thresholds that, could apply to one person but could not apply to another, because different people work differently. So using this predictive analysis is very powerful because it determines when someone's acting outside of their normal daily activities. There are other types of rule periods. The hour, you can monitor by an hour, month, quarter, and so on. And those all require set counts for activities. So for example, if somebody downloaded 100 documents, then we would send out an alert. But it's hard to customize that for each person, and that's what makes it predictive, so strong. Now we can use the custom. I use that for demos because demos are different. It's hard to mimic normal activity. And you can also use the hour and day if you want to follow that. And what we have coming soon is this machine learning, which takes the predictive and ratchets it up a couple notches. So it would predict time of day, so on and so forth, take a lot more parameters into account. And that's coming out in our next version. So this is our first rule that we set up for the legal group to show you how the demos work. And these are the activities that this particular rule is monitoring. So you can add as many activities as you like. And for the demo purposes, we show that we're watching for people deleting documents. So if somebody's all of a sudden deleting more documents than they normally would, then we'll send out an alert. And in this case, the first level is set at 50%. So if someone performs 50% more deletes than they normally do within the period of time, then first thing it's going to do is notify the first level notification group. Now, if that group doesn't do anything, or if they don't think the behavior is out of the norm, and the user keeps deleting documents and they get to 100%, twice what they usually do, it will send out a second notification, and it'll notify the second level group, which might include security people, might include a manager. And then we have unlimited number of thresholds that we can put on a particular activity, but I think 3 is normally the most that people go with. So at 150, so if someone's doing 2.5 times the normal number of deletes, their account's going to be disabled. And then the third level notification group will be sent an email saying, hey, this person's deleting a whole bunch of documents. You really ought to take a look at what they're doing, and their account's been disabled. And we set that up similarly for viewing documents, because if someone views documents on their screen, they can take screenshots, and that takes them out of the system. Print, same thing. If someone's printing 100% more documents than they normally print, number one, it's using a lot of paper, which is a concern these days. But number two, it's taking them again out of the system and out of the control. And then the zip and download is a pretty obvious one, because that can get you a whole bunch of documents at once and download them, and then they're out of the system and out from under the control of Content Suite. And in this particular case, if they do 150% more than their normal, that's the first notification. At 200% of normal, a second notification goes, and at 300, their account is supposed to be disabled. There we go, is disabled, and the third level group is notified. Now the last tab on the rules is where it applies to. So we show here that it can apply to the whole library. You can choose to add to just one group, or if there's a new user that's come in, maybe you hired somebody from your competition and you want to keep a close eye on them, you can choose to put a user or several users in a group and put more restrictive thresholds on those particular users, maybe for the 6 months or for first year they work there. So you have some flexibility in how you apply the rules. For example, salespeople generally don't have access to very many documents that can be considered private or could cause harm. So your sales force, you may not want to put heavy restrictions on them because the more stuff they're sending out, printing out, the better. However, your legal department or HR, people who have access to sensitive documents, you might want to put some pretty tight restrictions. So if they start downloading a bunch of documents, you want to know about it. So what I've done, since the predictive analysis is sort of difficult to demonstrate uh, in a demo like this, I've set up an employee rule that's in a custom rule period of 15 minutes. So what this does is it monitors the activity that I've chosen, the zip and download, for 15 minutes. And within 15 minutes, I download 2 documents. It'll send out a notification to the first level. If I take down 4 documents, it'll notify the second. And once I get to 6 documents, it'll disable the account. And so that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to switch over and put on my user hat. And this probably looks familiar to you. I'm going to go ahead and download a couple documents and do the zip and download and log back in as Mr. Snowden. And I'll zip and download those documents, download the zip file, save it. And I don't know if you could hear that. My phone's not turned up that loud, but I just got a notification on my phone that a threshold had been reached. So I'll go back in, and email is sometimes slower. So sometimes the email notifications don't come out quite as quickly. But here's an example from earlier today that I ran, so I'd have it to show you. Here's what the email looks like. A Guardian rule has exceeded an established threshold. It identifies which library you're in, which rule was broken, which user it was, the date and time, and then the activities. And it also shows which documents were downloaded. So this gives the administrator a lot of information to work with when they get this notification. They can see, hey, are these documents this person should be accessing? It answers a lot of questions, and they can decide, do I need to look into this further, or we can just ignore it for now. So as the user, I'm going to go ahead and skip the second threshold. I'm going to go down into the user, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to download about, let's see, I need to get to 6. So it's 2, 3, 4, 5. So this should disable my account. So I'm going to go zip and download those documents. And it's getting them ready. Download the zip file. And I'm already disabled. And there went the notification on my phone again. So this time I can't do anything. I'm back to ground zero. I'm logged out. I can't download any other documents. So we go back into the Guardian, and let's see if our emails are coming through. They do take some time. So there we go. So there's our first alert. So you can see this is where we've come. So you can see the violation, the documents that I'd been accessing, and the user has been disabled. So now I know that I need to go in and look under disabled users, refresh my list, and there's Edward Snowden, and here's what he's been doing during the last 15 minutes. He zipped and downloaded 8 documents total. He logged in. So it gives you a brief recap of the period of time where the violation occurred. Now, normally 15 minutes is not your window. It's going to be more like a day. And then you'd also see, so you'd see what they've been doing all day. You'd also see all activity for the last 7 days down here. So you can look and see if this user has been behaving erratically or if this is normal behavior. And if you want to go and talk to the person, or if you just decide, okay, everything's all right. There's nothing wrong with what he's doing. I'm going to go ahead and enable the user, boom, and the user back at his desk is right back in and can continue on working as if nothing ever happened. So that's the basics for how Guardian works. It's very simple. And in its simplicity is what gives us its power, because you can monitor users 24/7. It doesn't matter if the security people are asleep, if the user keeps downloading documents or keeps viewing and printing, their account gets disabled until somebody has the time to take a look and see if they're doing is correct, or if they need to be disciplined or escorted from the building. So that's the demo part of it. We'll go ahead and turn the controls back over to Josh, unless there are any questions in particular about the demo itself.
I should have said at the beginning, if anyone has any questions, please enter them in the chat window. I noticed one user had already asked a question, and I responded to it, and I'll go through the answer at the end, if you don't mind. So I'm going to go through a few use cases. The first one is legal. A lot of folks in the legal industry use the eDOCS system in particular. And a lot of them are using Guardian, among other reasons, because they are always concerned that an attorney in the organization is going to be leaving the firm surreptitiously. And before they announce that they're leaving, they are going to be downloading all the documents that they claim are his or hers. Well, depending upon the state, that may or may not be the case, but not a lot of law firms that when an attorney leaves wants their intellectual property removed. And so a lot of law firms will use Guardian in order to determine whether somebody is planning on leaving, or might be some indication that they are planning to leave, and to stop them from taking their documents with them when they do leave. Guardian can watch users and attorneys in particular to make sure they're not doing that. Another challenge would be someone in HR that doesn't get that promotion they were expecting and decides they're going to release confidential information about other employees. I actually have a very interesting story about somebody in the HR department of a very large organization with 56 different repositories that decided to release an internal memo written about the board of directors of one of their largest client, in which the memo that was being circulated back and forth described which members of the board were having affairs, which members of the board were alcoholics, and so on and so forth. And this happened in their Paris office. So Guardian could definitely prevent that sort of thing from happening. Another challenge is when a user's account is phished, and at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, the person who has phished the account decides to start downloading documents. Well, in that case, what could happen is that Guardian can send a notification that such and such a user, let's say it's a person named John Smith, is downloading documents at 2 o'clock in the morning. So the person getting the notification contacts John Smith, who is sound asleep in his bed, and says he has no idea what's going on. It certainly isn't him. Well, in that case, the firm would immediately know that his account has been phished, and the user, if their account has not already been disabled, can be disabled, and the continued downloading of the documents can be stopped. And last is a user in an investment bank. Similar to the Palo Alto Networks example, is working on a sensitive public offering and decides that he's going to make copies of all the documents and use them for his own investments, so he can make, or she can make, money from the unannounced IPO. In that case, Guardian, of course, will monitor that the person is downloading documents. The threshold has been exceeded. Notifications are set. If the threshold continues to be exceeded, the account can be disabled, and hopefully the user is stopped in his tracks and ends up in jail. Instead of, the user has taken the documents, invested in the stock, made a fortune, and then, only then, possibly will the organization know that the person has taken those documents. So, in summary, these are some of the advantages and benefits of Guardian. The thresholds by predictive analysis allows the system to monitor users based upon what is their normal activity, and if they exceed what is considered normal, Guardian will then send notifications or disable accounts based upon the exceeding of those thresholds. Any threshold can be the producer of a notification and or a disable. It's got its own management console. And of course, there are unlimited activities that can be monitored per rule and unlimited thresholds per rule that can be set. And with that, I would like to open it up for questions. If anybody has any, again, please enter them in the chat window. Brent, you'll be monitoring the chat window?
Yes, I've got an eye on it. Thank you.
So Brent, could you read the question that was asked by one of the attendees?
Sure. The first one was, does this rely on the audit interest being turned on? And the answer to that is no. There's no configuration that needs to take place on the content server system. We have an installation that installs a database table and some triggers in the database, and the rest of the work is done by a service that runs on the server. We had a second question, which is another good one. Can you trigger alerts based on security clearance level? For example, this user doesn't care how many regular downloads a user does, but wants to be alerted if a user downloads anything greater than top 10 secret docs. And at this time, we do not offer that, but we have had that suggested before, and we have that scheduled for a newer version down the line. And the next question we had is, how is this licensed? Is it user or transactional? And it's by user based upon your number of licensed users. Any other questions out there for us this morning or afternoon, depending upon where you are?
Thank you, Brent.
We have another question coming in. They're typing at the moment, so we'll have it here. And while we're waiting, just a couple other points. The one big plus for Guardian is nothing gets installed on the user's PC. Everything happens on the server. So it's a service that's running this monitoring the activity logs. This way, the users don't even know Guardian's out there until they possibly get their account disabled and need to get it turned back on and do their work. So it's a good thing to know. And then some organizations want it to be known, so they could use an internal messaging system to let people know that now you're being watched. Other companies prefer that Guardian remain in the background, so it can work either way.
It doesn't necessarily only have to be disables. It could be notifications as well, because if the person gets a phone call from their boss saying, why are you downloading all those documents? It's obvious that they're being watched. That's when they might know that something is watching them.
Yeah, very true. All right, I saw another question popping up, but it didn't complete. Anybody else have any questions for us?
All right, well, I want to thank all of you who attended this presentation today. If you have any questions, you feel free to reach out to us. Here is our website, www.wertheimglobal.com. You can send an email directly to us at sales@wertheimglobal.com. We look forward to hearing back from you. If you would like further information or your own custom demo, or if there's anybody else you would like us to make this presentation to, feel free to reach out.